lawlessness and looting. Basically, these two words sum up what was happening in the Russian-occupied territories of Ukraine in 2025. The Russian State Duma launched a mechanism for seizing so-called abandoned housing. Putin signed a decree requiring Ukrainians who have not obtained a Russian passport to leave their homes, and also the holding of fake local elections, which the world never recognized. And these are just a few fragments of the Kremlin's large-scale occupation policy, depriving people of the chance to live normally on their own land. So, leave by September 10th, or, I quote, settle your legal status. In other words, get a Russian passport. This was the condition given to Ukrainian citizens by the Russian occupation authorities in March. In the territory seized by Moscow, without this piece of paper, people were already deprived of basic necessities. They couldn't get medical care, apply for social benefits, find a job, or even send their child to school. Now they've basically been driven out of their own homes. The occupiers had another goal as well. The next mandatory step after getting a passport is obtaining health insurance and registering with the local clinic. But this has nothing to do with caring about people's health. This is how the occupation authorities are compiling a registry of residents. Medical institutions have received unofficial instructions to collect passport data, addresses, places of residence, and family composition, and to pass this information on to the occupation administrations. Special attention is given to men of conscription age. Their medical records are already being synchronized with the data from the so-called military enlistment offices. The reissuance of insurance policies is presented as a bureaucratic formality, but in reality, a system is being created where a person can only receive medical services at their assigned location. From a publication on the website of the Center for National Resistance. In addition, Russia has elevated the practice of seizing housing in the occupied Ukrainian territories to the federal level. In October, the State Duma approved a mechanism for confiscating so-called abandoned housing. This category includes apartments and houses belonging to Ukrainians who were forced to leave their hometowns and villages. At the same time, there are no clear criteria for how and on what grounds the owners can be deprived of their square meters. They are not specified in the document. Kremlin lackeys will make decisions at their own discretion. They plan to complete the expropriation by 2030, right at the end of Putin's 5th term. And before then, they need to manage to steal, sell, and divvy up everything. There are no clear criteria. The occupation administrations themselves will determine them, which paves the way for mass appropriation of property. In practice, this means that any home belonging to people who left because of the war can be declared ownerless. Even people who stayed in the occupied territories often fall victim to the steamroller. Russia has legalized looting in the temporarily occupied territories. The seized homes will be handed over to Russian military personnel, security forces, officials, and public sector workers who are being brought in from Russia. In other words, there's a deliberate replacement of the local population with people loyal to the regime. And here's a statement from the Center for Countering Disinformation under the National Security and Defense Council of Ukraine. Repressions, illegal detentions, torture, all of it. This has long been part of the genocidal policy of the regime and territories occupied by the Russian army. If you dare to criticize the Kremlin authorities, you get charged with extremism or anti-state activity. At the same time, they are trying to create an information vacuum in the region. At the local level, they have banned the sale, installation, and use of satellite equipment capable of receiving Ukrainian TV channels. The European Court of Human Rights has confirmed this. Russia bears full responsibility for all the abuse, rights violations, and unlawful sentences. The well-known human rights organization Freedom House has also published its report on the situation in the territories occupied by Russia. The occupation authorities deny full political rights to all residents, but they treat Crimean Tatars and ethnic Ukrainians with particular suspicion, and these groups face comparatively harsher persecution than ethnic Russians. Residents who do not have a Russian passport are considered stateless persons by the occupation authorities. By 2025, the occupation authorities had forced the majority of residents to obtain Russian passports, depriving those without them of access to basic services. From a Freedom House report. Russia has created a vast network of more than 200 institutions where abducted Ukrainian children are held for forced re-education. In the fall of 2025, a comprehensive report on this issue was published by the Yale University Humanitarian Research Lab in the United States. By the way, it was after their report in 2023. The International Criminal Court issued arrest warrants for Putin and the Commissioner for Children's Rights, Lyubova Belova. Now, human rights advocates are focusing attention on why the aggressor country is doing all of this. The true scale of the Russian network of institutions that militarize and re-educate children taken from Ukraine is enormous. At least 210 institutions, stretching from the Black Sea to Siberia and the Pacific coast, have such children in their care. In the vast majority of cases, children from Ukraine undergo re-education and are placed in forced militarization programs. These include combat training, ceremonial parades, and military drills, assembling drones and other equipment, as well as studying military history. Nathaniel Raymond, Executive Director of the Humanitarian Research Lab at the Yale School of Public Health, in an interview with Euronews, in September 2025, the Russian authorities tried to stage yet another show called elections in the occupied territories. On the so-called single voting day, they were electing, or more accurately, reappointing, members of city councils and the so-called governor of Sevastopol. Not a single civilized country recognized the results of this event.
Russia's organization of so-called elections on the temporarily occupied territory of Ukraine is illegal, and their results are null and void. No individuals allegedly elected as a result of this farce will have any legal grounds to perform official duties. Mock elections on stolen land will not help Russia legitimize the occupation. What was stolen will have to be returned. From a statement on the website of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Ukraine.
At the same time, no matter how the Russian occupation authorities change, not a single systemic problem has been resolved. There is a shortage of essential goods, unemployment, an outflow of the working-age population, and the shutdown of small and medium-sized businesses. People also have not received the promised apartments in exchange for those destroyed. Residents of Mariupol, occupied by Russia, say that even if high-rise buildings are being built where their destroyed homes once stood, none of it is for ordinary citizens.
Only about 15% of residents have received housing. We understand the difficult situation in the country, but that doesn't stop businessmen from building mortgages on the sites of our demolished homes, profiting from our misery and lining their own pockets.
The water supply situation in Donetsk and Makiivka remains critical. Water is supplied once every 3 days, according to a schedule that no one actually follows. In many apartments, dirty, murky sludge comes out of the taps, and it also has a terrible smell. It's not suitable for drinking or for cooking. They plan to solve the problem by launching the Donbas Canal. But at the construction site, they weren't stealing millions, they were stealing billions. So with each passing month, the crisis only got worse.
This is how people from Azotny have to collect water. This is how we live, scooping up water with a ladle. Luba, can you believe it, neighbor? The grandma's 83 years old. How can you live without water? How can you live?
Everything Russia does in the occupied Ukrainian territories is a deliberate and targeted policy. Its goal is to deprive people of choice, break their way of life, and replace the local population with people who are controlled and loyal to the regime. Millions of ruined lives mean nothing in this logic. What does the Kremlin want? Total control. And it tries to maintain that control through fear, threats, and repression.